an inspiration to many, including me. Please join me in extending a very warm virtual welcome to Ms. Indra Nooyi.
Hello, Pragya. Very nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you too, Indra. And thank you for making the time for being with us here today.
Thank you for having me.
So, since this is the first ever Fishbowl Book Bazaar, we are thrilled to have you with us. And there are thousands of Amazonians who've logged in from across India to hear you today. Many have also sent in questions. We received about over 250 of them, and one of them has been selected, and the employee is waiting backstage, as we call it here, and they will be coming on camera to speak to you in person as well.
Okay.
But we'll get to that section in a bit. Before that, I have some questions for you, Indra. So let's get just started with that. What motivated you to write the memoir? Why the book?
Great question. When I stepped down from PepsiCo, there were a lot of requests for me to write a book and tell my story. And I said, the one thing I'm not going to do is write a memoir. All that I'm going to do is write a bunch of policy papers. One policy paper on how do we advance women in management layers so that they too can become CEO of a large company? How do you build the pipeline? How do you provide the support mechanisms? And then as COVID started to hit the economy, what kind of support structures do we need to provide essential workers who need to show up at work all the time but don't have support for care, childcare or elder care? So I was planning to write policy papers on these two topics. And then multiple publishers came to see me and said, policy papers are fine, but they're boring, they're not sticky. And if you want to make change, use the arc of your life to tell a story and put the policy within that. So it's not a traditional memoir. It's more the arc of my life, lessons that came out from the arc of my life, leading to policy options and policy discussions. So this is an unusual memoir kind of book.
When sharing about one's life, it's often difficult to find those threads that are relevant to a wide audience. How did you sift through your deep and rich personal experience and decided what you wanted to share with the world?
I learned a lot about writing a book because I've never written a book and never realized how difficult it is to write one. The first thing I did was hired a very, very, very good writer to write with me because she was knowledgeable. She knew how to pull the whole thing together. And what you do is write a book proposal. What do you want the book to look like? How many chapters? How many words? How many words per chapter? And what lessons do you want to convey in each chapter? And are you going to do it by lesson or by chronology? So we decided to do the book chronologically and then decide what lessons fit into every part of the chronology. And once we mapped out the lessons, you start going through your life and saying, what aspects of the story need to be told to convey those lessons? And remember, this book is not a tell-all. Let me tell you about so-and-so that did bad things to me, or let me throw somebody under the bus. This wasn't that kind of a book. This was literally content, substance, lessons. So all the stories were picked to tell the story in a logical, interesting way. Now, we had more stories than we could accommodate in the book, which is good because it forced us to make choices and selections. But you have to dig deep into the recesses of your memory because what happened 40, 50 years ago is very hard to remember. And sometimes it's painful. You almost have to sit down and reflect on that experience. And so this was a 22-month writing process. And I must tell you, it went through highs and lows because emotionally there were highs, emotional lows were there. But overall, it was an interesting experience. Without the writer, I couldn't have done it.
So let's just get on a little bit about your personal and professional side of things. So tell us a bit about your roots in Chennai and some of the things that have contributed to making you who you are today.
I grew up in good old Madras, nerdy Madras in those days, sleepy Madras. The city went to sleep at 8 o'clock. And, just to put my birth in context, and for those in India, it becomes very relevant. I was born in 1955. That was just a mere 8 years after independence. So this was very early in the existence of independent India. And India was just trying to figure out educational institutions, role of women in society, professional schools. All of this was being figured out in India. So it was very early. And I was born into this supposedly conservative family in the south of India, but a family where basically the men in the family said, I don't care what anybody thinks in society, but the daughters, granddaughters are going to be allowed to study, do whatever they want to do within certain guardrails, but we want them to soar, we want them to dream. So I had a grandfather and a father, then supported by my mother, who basically said, study as much as you can, dream as much as you can, but we're going to get you married at age 18. Fortunately, that didn't happen, but they gave us all the resources to study, to leave home and go to Calcutta, or my sister's case, Ahmedabad, and basically allowed us to work, which was, I think, in those days, an enormous risk they took because society wasn't that forgiving about women working or women not getting married at age 18. So I think I had the lottery of life. I hit the lottery because I was born into the right family. I was given the right support, and I managed to get into the right colleges and institutions and therefore do well. So I'm a product of a great family that I was born into, but more importantly, mentors that came along the way in India that pushed me along. So I feel fortunate. I did my part, don't get me wrong, Pragya. I had to work my tail off, but I think I was helped along by all of those people.
A lot of us were curious actually when we were just talking about what should we ask you, and this one cropped up when you went to the US in the late 70s to study at Yale School of Management. Tell us about the whole experience of getting selected there, and if you faced any challenges adapting to a completely different environment from what you were used to growing up. How did you overcome some of those challenges? Would love to
So,
hear
yeah, yeah.
some contrast that you noticed between India and the US at that point in time in the 70s.
Uh, so the 70s, all my friends from the IITs were all going off to the US. So everybody I knew who was top mark getter at the IITs had all left to go to various MBA programs or MS programs in the US. So they would always write back saying, US is a seat of innovation, invention, culture. It's exciting. Everybody gets an opportunity to move ahead. And Indra, you've got to come to school here. And I'd sit back and think, saying, look, I've already done 2 years at IMCAL, but just to put the age in context, I was in IMCAL between the ages of 18 and a half and 20 and a half. So that's awfully young to go to business school with no work experience. So you somehow power through IMCAL as an academic exercise, but you really don't have practical knowledge. So even though I came out and I had successful jobs, I always had the urge to study some more. But I never understood really what my place in the US was. And then I chanced upon this new business school, Yale, that was linking the public sector and the private sector, really figuring out what's the role of corporations in society. And so I applied, never thought I'd get in. Then lo and behold, I got in. And then I never thought I'd get any aid because clearly we couldn't afford, that amount of money every year. And India had lots of foreign exchange controls those days. You could only take out $500. And then Yale surprisingly came through with a bunch of loans and work programs and some scholarship, a little bit of scholarship money. And then the biggest surprise of them all was that my parents gave me permission to go, which to me was just unbelievable. I got here. On the one hand, I was enamored with everything I saw, the orderliness, the discipline, traffic on the roads, no animals crossing the road. I mean, there's so much that I was wide-eyed about. Remember those days we didn't have the internet, so we really couldn't see all of the US and India, only books in the library. But then I get to Yale and everything is alien to me. There was no food that I liked. I'm a vegetarian still. I struggle with food. I struggled with the fact that it was so quiet. Struggled with the fact that it was lonely. So the first week was very difficult, having to go to grocery store and do self-shopping, self-checkout, because in those days, India only had grocery stores where you pick up something and give it to a clerk who rang it up for you or even picked it out for you. So everything was new to me. So the first week I was desperately lonely. And then, various angels came out and helped me along and helped me get used to the US. And I mean, people don't even realize India in those days didn't have pizza. So I come to the US as a vegetarian. People tell me, you got to like pizza. It's a staple diet for vegetarians. Just put a lot of red chili flakes and you'll think it's good, spicy food. I take the first bite of pizza and I gag because I've never had mozzarella cheese before. Little things like this, people don't even realize it's such a learning curve. I don't know how to dress. I don't know how to shop, what winter clothes to buy. I mean, it was, looking back, it was a tough, tough onboarding, which got easier as the time went on, and people reached out and helped and pulled me along. But the first few days, first few weeks, I'd say, my God, I can't even think about how difficult it was.
And you're still a vegetarian, right?
Still
You
a
continue to be a
vegetarian, yeah,
vegetarian for those years. Yes.
yeah.
So, let's get on with closer home to PepsiCo and GE. At a very young age, you ended up at PepsiCo, and GE also wanted to hire you at the same time. What do you think made you a top candidate for both organizations?
I think in the case of GE, it was the person I was working with at ABV, Gerhard Schulmeier, who was so revered. He knew Jack Welch very well, and his endorsement made a huge difference. So I walked into the GE meeting with Jack with the wind at my back. He already had a very positive view of me, so I didn't have to dig myself out of a hole. And then the interviews went quite well. And I think Jack really wanted to have some more women in the C suite. So he's looking at this combination and saying, here's a woman who's smart, people say she's good, got to get her in. In the case of PepsiCo, similar sets of issues. I didn't know anybody at PepsiCo when I went there, but I think Wayne Calloway, the CEO, basically said, here's somebody who speaks her mind, who's been trained in strategy consulting, multiple industries, seems to have done well everywhere. All her reference checks are wonderful. And by Jove, I need somebody like her in my executive suite because we're a global company. We need to think globally, and we need people who are diverse in our executive suite. But I can't compromise on quality and talent, basic talent quality at that time. So I walk in, and Wayne says, I've got to hire her somehow. And so between Jack Welch and Wayne Calloway, it was a friendly banter because they both knew each other very well. But at the end of the day, Wayne Calloway won out and PepsiCo won out because of the culture of the company, the humility of Wayne Calloway. GE was an awesome company then too, but PepsiCo won out.
So just a follow up on this. If others are faced with a similar situations, what would be your advice for how to make this decision? What are some of the things one should look for in an employer of choice?
I mean, don't pick the job with the highest pay because that would be the biggest mistake. The discussion on pay and how much people are going to pay you should come at the end. Think about the business. Does the business interest you? Is the culture of the company something that you feel good about? And look for cultural markers, how people interact with you, the way they make you feel welcome. Are they willing to uh, help you onboard into the company and develop you? Do they have those conversations with you even during the interview process? Look for cultural aspects because at the end of the day, paycheck is what you take home. It's a physical thing. The culture is what you're going to live with day in and day out. The culture is what's going to determine whether you're successful in that company. So look for all of the cues on the culture before you say, these guys are paying me X $1,000 more, so I'm just going to take the job with the biggest bucks. That usually doesn't work out well in the long term. Sometimes it does, but not always. Put all the factors down and then pick the right company.
Thanks. I think that's simple but great advice and time tested, isn't it?
Yep, you bet.
Time and again. So, were there times in your professional career where you felt like the harmony between work and life, or any kind of balance between work and life, was absolutely impossible, and you regretted your career choices? How did you navigate those times?
I had challenges almost every day because, when you have two young girls, you have a family, you have a husband who's also working, very successful, and then you have aging parents who live with you now and then. Um, you always have this tussle between, am I doing right by them? Am I doing right by my job? But I tell you one thing, I never once wanted to give up my job, really. Only once in my life, I asked my kids when they were complaining about how mom's never available. I said, okay, do you want me to quit my job and stay home? And their instant reaction was, no, I don't want you to do that. You worked so hard to get here, keep going. But I will tell you, um, many women have a fatal flaw, which is the perfection gene. We want to be the perfect mother, the perfect wife, the perfect business person, all of it rolled into one. And because of this perfection gene, we always have this um, doubt about, are we doing the right thing? Regret about, maybe I should spend more time here or here. At some point, we've got to put that all aside and say, I did the best I could for my family, for myself, and for the people around me. You cannot be perfect. A stay at home mom worries about, maybe I should have gone to work. Somebody who's working wishes they were staying at home. So there are regrets, enough regrets to go around. The fact of the matter is, we need women who are talented in the workforce today. And so let's talk about how to attract all of them to participate in the paid workforce, because the country needs all the talent. And let's help them get rid of the regrets and provide support structures so that they can be with their family and also come to work.
Thanks, Indra. And maybe hearing from someone like you is reassuring, and therefore I will ask a follow-up question related to what you just answered. You have two lovely daughters. Have you been a role model mom to them?
Depends on the day of the week. Some days they'll say, wonderful. I have to tell you one thing, Pragya. It's not easy being a daughter of mine. If I had a normal name, would have been easy. A name like Nooyi doesn't come along often. I think the only Nooyi name is our family, my husband's family, because it's the name of the village rather than any family name. And so anywhere the kids go, the first question they're asked is, are you related to Indra Nooyi? So they judged based on the relationship with me, which makes it very hard for them. Second is, people expect them to, perform at that level, which is also very, very unfair. So in many ways, I think being my daughter is very, very difficult. And so I have to be very sensitive to that subject all the time with them. So, as a consequence, most moms are punching bags. I am a bigger punching bag for my kids who say, you know, why are you so famous? Because it affects us in every which way. On the other hand, they're also incredibly proud of me. But I have got to understand both the conflicts that they go through. When they go through this, why do I have such a famous mother? I have to understand what they're going through. When they tell me they're proud, I just have to embrace them. I have to somehow make it all happen.
Maybe I think I should be asking the question in reverse. Have they been role model daughters to you? Considering that you're
Um,
proud of how they have handled this.
Everything that they do, I'm proud of. And I'm saying that I'm proud of everything they do is because they both are doing things that I wasn't doing. They both got their MBAs, but they got into fields that are completely different than what I was doing or I would have done. One is in the area of psychedelics and investing in that area. The other's in video games, both of which I know not much about. Um, they both are with their own group of friends, which does not ever draw on mother's fame at all. I mean, they are people on their own. They are grounded. They're not, haughty. They're not arrogant. Nothing. They're just good kids that way. A lot of respect for the elders. So I am deeply grateful because to whoever it is that made our kids turn out that way, because these two are very, very good kids. And I look at them every day and say, I don't know how I could have coped with a mother like me. Somehow these kids seem to be managing okay. So I'm grateful.
there was this one comment you had made once, and I know it's a bit of controversy around it, and it keeps coming back. Where if read in the right context, I understand personally what you had said. You had said that women can't have it all. That's all a myth. And I think it was taken a bit out of context and blown out of proportion. And there's been a lot of questioning around it. Would you like to elaborate? I
Yes,
personally, when I heard it for the first time, was a bit moved. But as I progressed in my career, I know exactly what you meant. It's getting over the guilt, it's living with the choices. So maybe we want to hear from you about that a bit more.
the problem we have, Pragya, is that when we talk about family, we say it's female. Somehow, family is female. Nobody says family is family. It's all of our husband, wife, and kids. They'll say family means female, the woman has to take care of it. That's how it has been. That needs to change. But as long as family is viewed as female, what happens is the woman has to do 4 or 5 jobs. When you come to work, that's a full time job. And because you're in a workplace which has a lot of unconscious bias, you're working harder than everybody. So it's 2 full time jobs. And if you become a CEO, that's 4 full time jobs. It's so taxing. When you go home, you're the mother, you're the wife. That's another couple of jobs thrown in. And if you're part of an Indian family, you're also responsible for the in laws or the parents or whatever. You become the primary caregiver. So if you look at these multiple jobs you have to do, given that the time is limited and the pressures on you are so much, it's impossible to say, I'm going to do it all perfectly. So I'm going to come back and say, originally they said even men can't have it all. You know what? Men have had wives. That's why they've had it easy, much easier. But for women, it's very hard to be good at all of this because there's so many competing demands on our time. And I will say to you, during my evolution as a CEO, because we didn't have all these technologies, not even the smartphone, it was a constant juggle. And you just hope the most important balls don't fall. I think now with all of the technology tools, we can go from juggling work and life and the multiple roles and trying to have it all and struggling to maybe I can balance it now with some flexibility, some work from home, intelligent deployment of technology. I can balance it all. But even now, it requires both members of the family, both leaders of the family, to work together and not just say, family is female, you take care of it. And right through COVID, you're responsible for everything. I'm just going to keep doing my own thing. That cannot happen. So I think we have to evolve our thinking. And I'd come back and say the stress we put on women is just spectacular. It's just punishing. We have to think about women as people and say, how can they handle so much work, so much of a workload? Let's figure out how to share in it so we can all, be normal people as opposed to buckling under the stress of everything that needs to get done.
On that note, how important do you think it is to have women in corporate boards and as CEOs? Why and how can organizations get better at having more women in senior position? Maybe a very obvious question, but an important one.
I'm going to give you some numbers from the US, and I'm sure you have equivalent numbers in India. 70% of high school valedictorians are women. Women graduate from colleges at 10 points higher rate than men. Okay? 55 to 45. Women are getting more professional degrees than men. In select STEM schools, the very selective schools, women are getting 1 point higher GPA than the men. Even in a school like MIT, 47% of the class is women. So I'm looking at this going, women are hungry. They are studying a lot. They're working hard. They want freedom. They want to do what their brain tells them they should do. They have hopes, dreams, and aspirations. Then when it comes to senior management jobs, board positions, why are we excluding them from the selection pool? If you want the best and the brightest, don't think about gender, don't think about anything, hire from the best and the brightest. If you did that, you would start to have a more equally represented board. But if you say, no, I want the best and brightest among the men, which is what's been happening traditionally.
Mm.
You'll end up with a board without many women. So I think in today's world, if you want the best around the table rather than just people like you around the table, you've got to include the women. You've got to include people of all backgrounds because talent is the single biggest competitive advantage of countries, of companies, of organizations. We have to go find the best talent, irrespective of gender, ethnicity, background, whatever, caste, creed, anything. And if we really focused on that, we'd be surprised how much talent exists outside of what we traditionally hired from. And so I'm thinking like an economist. I am not thinking like a feminist. If you think like an economist and you want to move your company and your country ahead, you've got to pull the women up because they are wicked smart, and the men too. I'm not trying to put down a group. All that I'm saying is draw equally from the whole population.
Mm. So, Indra, how do you look at your future? What's next from here?
You know something, Pragya? I'm busier now than I've ever been. The board of Amazon is a great experience, Philips, all the other things that you talked about. I do a lot of non-profit boards, the National Gallery of Art, Memorial Sloan Kettering. These are all very fulfilling. I teach up at the US Military Academy in West Point. Again, very fulfilling. So I have a very, very full life. But, as a continuation of the book, I'm really working on what is it going to take to improve the care infrastructure so that, uh, you know, young family builders are supported and women who are still carrying most of the burden of family nurturing are supported. So we're working on at a state, a city, and a community level. What's a scorecard for that particular area being family friendly, childcare friendly, and then looking to see what they have in the state and working backwards to say how can we fill the gaps. In India, we're working with some people there to say, working with corporates to start with, how can we build wonderful childcare centers for ages 0 to 5, really top notch childcare centers, not just for management people, but more for the essential worker, the hourly worker who cannot really afford great childcare. How can you build childcare centers so that you're focusing on the next generation of the population so that at this very formative age of 0 to 5, before they go to a regular school, they can be developed properly. So stay tuned.
There was one person whose question we found most interesting, and he is here to ask you his question.
Good morning, Balaji.
Vanakkam from Chennai, Indra.
Vanakkam.
I'm Balaji with the Amazon advertising team in India.
Uh-huh.
I have an anecdote followed by a question. I've seen professionally aspiring women colleagues and friends feel resigned and settle for less over time. What are the ways in which a father, partner, brother, son, a male colleague, or a friend can support a woman to shoot for the moon, apart from providing the financial support when she needs it?
Balaji, let me ask you a question. Why are they resigned? Why did they resign themselves to something less than what they can do?
I feel, like you said, they are juggling a lot of things, which I think they're not able to manage. Like you said, at most times, family goes synonymous with the women folks. I guess that's one reason I see every day, but I'm open to insights from you as well.
Okay, actually, it's a wonderful, wonderful question, Balaji. And I will tell you, there has to be an education of men on this issue. We have to educate them to say, when you give birth to a girl child, nobody says, I've given birth to a unpaid laborer for life. That's not what you say when you have a girl child. You say, here's somebody who's my child, or my sister, or my niece, or whatever. They should be able to hope and dream and do whatever they want to do. Okay, instead, what do? We throw so many barriers at them. We put so much pressure on them. And on top of that, I've just been reading articles about domestic abuse. Okay, domestic abuse is significant, and most of the time, 99% of the time, it's men on women. And the worst part is society looks the other way when they see domestic abuse happening. I think we have to go back and do a massive education of men, of in-laws, and say, wait a minute, don't allow this to happen. You wouldn't want to happen. You wouldn't want this to happen to your daughter. Why do
Yeah.
you allow it to happen in society? And if we don't remove these sorts of issues, I think not only are we making women resign themselves to a life that's not the greatest for them, I think it's worse still, we are sub-optimizing the talent in the country. But let me add something else, Balaji. Life is messy. Families are fragile. Families are messy. You never know when somebody is going to run into big issues. During COVID, a lot of people were impacted.
Yeah.
What happens to the woman if she quits her job, doesn't have an income, and something happens in the family? She's out in the road because, she's still the primary caregiver for the kids. And
Yeah.
sometimes she doesn't even have a safety net. So I think this is no longer a woman versus man issue. I think it's an issue of economics.
Hmm.
So I really come back and say there has got to be a mass education of men, mass education, and a mass education of people of the older generation to say, hey, let's not just pass down this myth that the in-law should be torturing the daughter-in-law. I think things have changed a lot, but they've got to
Yeah.
change a lot more, a lot more. And every time
Absolutely.
I read about all these stories of attacks on women, I have to tell you, even though I'm many, many miles removed from India, I weep about those things. And I wonder where the outrage is from the men. There's usually outrage from women. I see women on the streets protesting. Where is the outrage from men?
Hmm.
I think you've got to evoke the consciousness of men to say, this is enough. In everything you're talking about, we revere women in Indian mythology and religion. We revere them. India has the best laws on the book to protect women. In practice, forget it.
Here's Rakesh Rangdal, who's asking, you have been consistently ranked among the world's 100 most powerful women. What does power mean to you? And is there anything you have done to ensure it doesn't damage you as a person?
If you let power go to your head, you can be sure that's the precursor to a fall. All these lists don't mean anything. Those lists don't get you more peace at home. Those lists don't help you run a better company. Those lists don't give you better health, nothing. The problem with these lists is if you're already up there, there's only one place to go, that's down. So you end up worrying about how to stay there. My answer is don't look at those lists, don't worry about your position. Just assume that those lists exist because they're just trying to showcase the women. Let it remain as that. It is not a power ranking. It's not. Doesn't mean anything. Um, I'll come back and say in the book I talk about a very famous incident where my mother said, "Leave the crown in the garage." I think that with power goes humility. The two of them have to go together. Power without humility is a formula for disaster. Okay, and so I think that if we don't all realize that power by itself is poisonous, um, we'd be crazy. We would have no friends. We would be all lonely to the very end. But power with humility allows a harmonious life.
The next one is Karupya Vishal Swaminathan, and he asks, in college, I had a subject called Principles of Management. I distinctly remember reading in one of my books about you, Indra, you still sing in your office and are known to go to work barefoot. What's your take on the importance of being authentic, being yourself in the workplace?
That is just a myth. Me coming to work barefoot, are you crazy? Not a chance. When the early days when I joined PepsiCo, after 5 or 6 o'clock, when you're on your heels the whole day, your feet hurt. So I'd kick off my shoes after 5 or 6 and walk in my office on the carpeted floor bare feet because, the feet just were killing. So all of a sudden, I come to work bare feet. And I don't sing at work. Sometimes in the evening, if I'm very stressed out, I might hum a tune in my head while I'm working. All of a sudden, because the newspapers and the media, when I became CEO, wanted to paint me as this exotic being, they said I wore Indian clothes to work, which I've never done, that I come barefoot or I walk around barefoot in the office and I sing. All three are myths, forget it. But it is useful to stay authentic to your roots, but it's also important to blend in. Don't try to become somebody you're not. Don't try too hard to be somebody you're not. Because if you try to do that, then you're always struggling to say, oh, which persona should I show now in this interview or this appearance? Just evolve a good persona for yourself that blends, a bit of your background and a bit of where you are today. That's most important.
And Satyajit Sinha Chaudhary is asking this. As you kept growing in your career, how important did you think emotional intelligence was for success? Does it become more transactional at senior levels or does it get even more important?
You get to the top, you stay in the top only if you have empathy, emotional intelligence, be able to read the room, be able to read people. I think power-hungry CEOs lack emotional intelligence, but people who look upon the CEOship as an incredible responsibility and deal with that privilege very, very responsibly are those with incredible empathy and emotional intelligence. And I think in today's world in particular, where it's so hard to hold on to the best and the brightest, if you don't have emotional intelligence and transmit that culture down the company that's important to the company, you will lose your best and the brightest. Because nobody wants to come to work in a cold, antiseptic company. They want to come to a place where there's purpose, there's emotion, there's affiliation. So it's very important we focus on that. It's a learned skill, it's not a taught skill.
I'll move on to the second one, and this is more in a similar area that you have spoken about, but I will still ask this question from Sneha Kyatam, who asks, in a world of mostly male leaders, how did you manage to move up the ladder and break the glass ceiling?
Sheer hard work. I mean, writing the book, it became absolutely clear to me the role of hard work. Every point in time, I never earned brownie points for the way I looked or the color of my skin or the fact that I was a woman. I was an exotic being who was always, men were always thinking, or people in the room were thinking, what's she doing here? What can she contribute? And so I had to power my way through based on just my knowledge and how I approached problems and my dedication to the job. There is no substitute for core competence. You cannot earn a place at the table because you're a female or male or you're a certain background or an ethnic, group. No. You have to earn a seat because of your competence. And that's all I focused on. I was dedicated to the company or job I was doing. And I always worried about how I was going to help my boss make better decisions, not necessarily how do I showcase myself. And that's what allowed me to get ahead. I put the company before me all the time.
On this one, and also just reflecting on the one on emotional intelligence, Indra, there was the latest article like a couple of days back, which also said that from you, where you're saying that women leaders need to root for women leaders. We don't see that happening a lot. What are your thoughts on that? And who was rooting for you? Were there any women leaders in your life rooting for you?
So I grew up at a time when there weren't any women in the workforce. Remember, I had no women bosses, very few women peers. And the sisterhood could not exist because there wasn't a critical mass of people who were women. On our board, we had women, and my God, people like Dina Dublon on my board were big supporters of me. And so I think that the sisterhood amongst women has not formed strongly as yet. And it's important that the sisterhood is formed because the sisterhood has to support each other. And we need to get there. We are not there as yet. We still think that we're competing with each other. We actually think that only one woman is going to go up as opposed to the best talent is going to go up. So we view women as competition as opposed to we're all in the same pool, men and women. The best people are going to go up. The men have a lovely brotherhood, not against the women, but that's how they've evolved over the years. We shouldn't feel lonely. We should have relationships and brotherhoods with the men, but also with the women professionally, and look to see how we can pull each other up to get to the next level. We are yet to fine tune that sisterhood. We're in the early stages still.
We'll change track a little bit now from here and look at some professional advice from your own personal experience to some of us. And here's Nirali Modi asking, how did you maintain the same level of focus and discipline and sheer hard work, as you said, at your work for such a long period of time?
I don't know. And I write in the book that I don't know why I'm wired a certain way. I'm wired in a bizarre way. When I dig into a topic or I take on something, I think I should give it my all and do the best job I can. I'll give up all my personal time and just focus on learning more and more and more about the subject so I can then zoom out and decide what needs to be done to shape the issue. So it's an enormous commitment of time. You have to learn to speed read. You have to learn to store a lot of stuff in your head, connect dots to make shapes when shapes are not easily apparent. And so it's again a skill fine-tuned over many years. And personally, I don't think we should expect that from everybody because in retrospect, as I was writing the book, I too was tired thinking about my own life. So it was just, how the hell did I do all this? Why did I do so much? Why didn't I kick back and enjoy myself? I've never had a vacation where I enjoyed myself. I always worried about how much more can I read? How do I get ready for the next big thing I had to do? So it's very hard to sustain it on an ongoing basis. You have to balance yourself. I would strongly recommend balance. Take care of your mental health. Take time for yourself. And learn all of these tools. Today you have abstracts. You have YouTube videos which give you subject matter that's been already digested and given to you in pithy terms. Use all those tools. Those didn't exist when I was growing up. Use all those tools judiciously. But don't be as driven and obsessive as I was, because if I had to do it again today, I don't think I could have done it. I don't think I can do
it. That's very honest. And to that, Muskan Khajuria is asking, do you have a daily habit that you think has contributed significantly to your long-term success, both personally and professionally?
Yeah, I don't sleep. I sleep 4 hours a night. And that gives me extra 4 hours or 5 hours to work. I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. Absolutely not. I would love to sleep for 8 hours, except sleeping pills make me sleep for 2 days, so I don't touch it. And sometimes I put on all kinds of sleep music to try to sleep, and I'm listening to the nuances of the sleep music as opposed to sleeping. So it's not a good situation. So look, 24 hours in a day, compartmentalize it, figure out what you want to do in every hour of the day. Don't start off by saying, I want to be CEO. Say, what can I do and be happy doing it? And if that takes you to the next level and next level, that's great. If you start off saying, I want to be CEO, then you start to obsess over it. Life has got a lot more than trying to become a CEO. Do what you can do what makes you happy, do what your emotion and your brain can accommodate. Don't overdo it.
Moving to the next question, Kajal Goyal is asking, did you ever wonder about founding a company of your own? In your opinion, how different or similar are these two? Leading an existing multinational giant and founding and leading your own startup company.
Different challenges. I never thought about starting my own company because Every company I went to, I thought was mine. I never looked at PepsiCo or ABB or Motorola as a company that I worked for. I thought it was my company. So it made it very, very personal. The big difference is when you're a small company, you don't have all the resources of big companies. And so you have to bootstrap everything, and somehow you've got to make it happen. And when you start up something, there are many stall points. You have to cross every stall point and somehow move up. In a large company, it's already been established for you, processes are established. The challenge with large companies, you've got to keep growing this large company. So in a large company, the annual growth expected of you is 50 or 100 small companies you have to add to the large company every year. So the scale is very different. But the resources exist, the processes exist, the systems exist. You've just got to make them better every day. So two different challenges. I was more of a make a large company better and keep it growing kind of a person. There are many others who I'm in awe of, who start small companies, power through it, somehow work days and nights, sleep on the floor, and somehow make it happen. So I would say that I respect and admire those startup leaders as much as I do leaders of big companies.
Kunal Krishna asks, what's the worst advice you've ever got?
The worst advice. It's not the worst advice I ever got. It's more, always people say balance your life. Try to do everything in balance. They were not wrong, but nobody ever realized that when you're in senior positions, it's up or out. If you're in a senior position, if you're not expanding your knowledge base and contributing more and more to the company, somebody more junior is going to be moved into your position. And then you're out because there is no way to go except up or out. And so, people think getting to a senior position is great. It is. But staying in those senior jobs is very difficult, especially for CEO jobs. So whenever my husband would tell me or anybody would say, take time for yourself, spend time exercising or take a walk or go on a vacation, I'd go, where's the hour for that? I don't have that time. And my husband was recently CEO of a big NGO. And I'd say to him, take a walk, go exercise. He'll say, where's the time for it? I go, aha, you see how it feels to be a CEO? It is an all-consuming job. So I'd keep getting advice to, balance my lifestyle a bit more. It wasn't available because I had no technology tools those days to make any part of my life easy. Only in the last year or two of my life did some of these start to appear. That was a slog.
And I'll move to our next section, which is the rapid fire. And it is the rapid fire, so we expect prompt, impulsive answers. So here goes the first one. What are some of your favorite things to do to unwind?
I listen to music and I watch Yankees baseball.
What's your favorite food?
I'm from Madras, so I have to have my South Indian meal every day. I'm just an old traditionalist that way.
What's your pet peeve?
I've always wanted to be a good ballroom dancer. I took ballroom dancing lessons, and because of COVID, I stopped everything. But I always wished I could be a good ballroom dancer. Don't ask me why. I just wanted to be a ballroom dancer.
3 words that describe Indra Nooyi's life in full.
Dedicated, passionate, empathetic.
If you could go back in time today, what would you say to young Indra who has freshly graduated from college?
Tell her dream big. At the same time, make sure you take time for yourself too. Because life is a long, long journey. And one day you look back and say, oh my God, look at all the things I missed out. So take time for yourself too. Unfortunately, Indra is not wired that way, but I would say that to Indra.
Your all-time favorite book and why?
I grew up reading Enid Blyton and Richmal Crompton and Billy Bunter and all that stuff. As I came later on in life, I went back to England and bought all those books and I put them in my cupboard. And it's surprising. I read so many books today. I mean, I read 2, 3 books a week, fabulous books. But the time that I really get a chuckle and I go back to my childhood is when I read, Mallory Towers or St. Clair's or Billy Bunter or William and the series. I laugh at those silly stories. And so it's not my all-time favorite book, but it's my all-time favorite genre that brings back so many memories of my childhood.
What are you reading this week then?
Oh, this week I'm reading serious stuff. I'm reading the biography of Angela Merkel, written by Kati Martin. Beautiful book. And I'm in awe of Angela Merkel. And I'm also reading a book on the future of money. What is crypto? What is it going to do? Heavy stuff, not William or Billy Bunter or Enid Blyton.
Which is the one all-time favorite leadership book that you would suggest to us?
There isn't a leadership book I would suggest, but I would suggest, think about books on how corporations should fit into society and how they should change society. So I read lots of books about what are the societal issues and what can corporations do to improve society. Whether it's Palaces for the People by Eric Kleinenberg or Bill George's book about True North. So I read all of these books and I try to form pictures for myself on what should leaders be doing? How should they be running companies in a responsible way? How do they help address the inequalities that exist today in the world? That's what I focus on.
If Indra Nooyi had to be vocally self-critical, what would she say?
One of the things that I always did was I raised the bar for everyone to perform at higher and higher levels. I did help them get to the higher levels because I thought my job was to develop people. I would say 75% of the people loved it, and they always left saying, I learned so much more. 25% said, can do it. She's always pushing us to do more. She's never happy with what we deliver. And if I had to go back and tell Indra Nooyi to say that perhaps not everyone wants to be driven to higher and higher levels of performance. You've got to segment the people you're working with to say, these people are capable of feedback and being pulled up. These people you've got to slow down. I somehow felt my responsibility was to pull everybody up, and I shouldn't be creating two classes of citizens. I'd go back and tell Indra Nooyi, chill, think about people differently.
What was the last thing you bought at Amazon?
Oh my God, I buy something every day. I bought one of these foam collars that you put in the microwave, and it gives you heat for a good 5 or 10 minutes. Has a lovely smell of cinnamon and cloves, and oh God, when you're always looking at the computer and your back starts to hurt, putting that is great. I bought 2 of them. They haven't yet been delivered. They will be delivered soon because they have to come from someplace else. But I'm buying something from Amazon every day.
On that note, describe Amazon in one sentence.
Perhaps the most consequential company in recent times.
Okay, so Indra, with that, we come to an end of today's Fishbowl. Thank you so much for your time, for being frank, honest, candid, and sharing parts of your life with us, and some great learnings which I've personally taken out, and I hope all the Amazonians online also enjoyed it. Once again, thank you very much, Indra, and thank you to all Amazonians logged in today. Good evening, please take care, and bye.